All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something that's, well, it's kind of invisible, but it is absolutely crucial for any research project. We're talking about the step that turns a total mass of raw information into insights you can actually trust. It often goes unseen, but trust me, this is where the real work happens. So let's get into it. So, before we even touch the how, let's just start with a really high stakes question. It's something every researcher, every CEO, pretty much every decision maker has to wrestle with. What do you do when the very information you're banking on might be, well, wrong? And that question, it leads us right into our first section, where we're going to see exactly why getting the answer right is so incredibly important. It can literally be the difference between a huge success and a very, very expensive failure. I mean, just picture it. A company sinks millions into a new product launch, all based on what they think their customers want, only to watch it completely bomb. This sort of thing happens way more than you'd think. And it's usually not because the product was bad. It's because the data was bad. It sent them charging in completely the wrong direction from the get-go. And, our source material just nails it with this point. The final, shiny insight you get at the end is only ever as good as the raw stuff you started with. It is the classic definition of garbage in, garbage out. You can have the fanciest analysis in the world, but it won't save you if your data foundation is a wreck. Okay, so how do researchers actually dodge these huge million-dollar mistakes? How do they take this chaotic mountain of survey responses and turn it into something reliable? Well, it's definitely not guesswork. It's a system. They follow a roadmap, a really systematic journey that takes that raw data through a whole series of checks and balances. What you're looking at here is basically the blueprint for turning that chaos into clarity. Every single step is there for a reason, to catch errors and make sure the final data is rock solid. So, where does this whole journey start? Well, it begins right at the source with the very first look at all the raw data they've collected. This is kind of like the initial triage where the big cleanup really begins. This first step, it's called editing. And you can seriously think of it like a detective taking a first look at a crime scene. Researchers are going through every single questionnaire, piece by piece, looking for clues that something just isn't right. So what are they actually looking for? I mean, what kind of clues are we talking about here? Well, they're screening for all the common stuff, like incomplete answers or responses that just don't make sense. But they're also on the hunt for total logical impossibilities. Like that classic example of a 25-year-old who claims they've been widowed for 30 years. Yeah, right. Catching these things early on is absolutely critical. Okay, so once that first check is done, researchers run smack into the next big challenge. How in the world do you take all of these subjective, human answers and make them something a computer can actually understand and analyze? I mean, this is a huge problem in research. You can't just feed words and feelings into a statistical program. It doesn't work that way. You have to translate all of that qualitative stuff into the one language a computer gets, numbers. So, how do they solve it? Well, it all starts with a really carefully designed questionnaire, like this one here. The questions are structured on purpose to guide people into very specific answer categories. That's the first move toward making all this data quantifiable. And the key, the magic wand that makes this whole translation possible, is something called a codebook. Just think of it like a dictionary for the data. It's a super precise guide that assigns a unique number to every single possible answer for every question. This whole process, that's what we call coding. It's how something totally subjective, like a strong preference, systematically becomes, say, a 7, while a weak preference becomes a 1. It's the methodical, step-by-step process of turning human opinions into cold, hard, analyzable data points. All right, so the data's been checked, and we've turned all those words into numbers. We're getting close, but now it's time for the final deep clean, the last polish to make sure everything is just right. This is where data cleaning really kicks in. We're talking about running computer programs to automatically spot those logical impossibilities we mentioned earlier. A program can instantly flag that a 25-year-old can't possibly be widowed for 30 years. Then a human researcher can jump in, investigate, and make a logical fix, like changing the age to 55. But wait, there's one last super important step. What happens if the group of people you surveyed, your sample, doesn't really reflect the bigger population you're trying to understand? This is a huge deal. It can seriously skew your results and lead to things like misleading election polls. Well, researchers have this really clever statistical trick up their sleeve to fix this. It's called weighting. It's kind of like rebalancing a scale. It mathematically gives a little more oomph to answers from groups that were underrepresented and a little less to groups that were overrepresented, all to make the final data a true mirror of the population. And this is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Look here, in this survey, folks with 7 or more years of college were way overrepresented in the sample, about 12% versus only about 7% in the actual population. Weighting corrects for that, making sure their voices are proportional and the final results aren't skewed. So, after this whole meticulous journey, from that first check all the way to this final statistical tweak, the data is finally ready. It's clean, it's accurate, and it's truly representative. It's insight you can actually trust. So let's just quickly run through that path again, right? You've got the initial questionnaire check, then the careful editing, then coding the words into numbers, followed by a deep data cleaning, and finally, those statistical adjustments like weighting. Each step builds on the one before it, creating that solid foundation. And here's the bottom line. All this behind the scenes work that nobody ever really sees, that is what separates a $1 million blunder from a true game-changing breakthrough. It's the discipline that makes sure our conclusions are actually based on reality, not just random noise. Which leads me to a final question for you. The next time you see a statistic, a new poll, some study that's making headlines, are you going to stop for a second and ask yourself, hey, is that data clean? Because now you know that the answer to that simple question, well, it changes everything.